During the first winter, we suffered from cold and hunger beyond expression. Many of us only had one shirt and were obliged to go without any whenever we washed it. We were allowed, or rather said to be allowed, 1 pound of bread and 1 pound of fresh beef per day. Yet, through the injustice and dishonesty of the person who dealt out our allowances, we were robbed even a part of this humble pittance. We had scarcely enough firewood to cook our meat. Pinched with hunger, half naked and chilled with the cold, we were forced to share our beds with filthy vermin, tainted with infections of mortal distempers, and scented with the nauseous smell of the dying and the dead. We were under Hessian guard, some of whom were destitute of all humanity. Among them was one of their corporals who, every time he mounted guard, would lather prisoners with his rattan. We made a complaint to the commissary, who ordered that he should no longer mount guard. Through the winter, we drew fresh provisions, which were very poor. Then, in the spring, after the provision fleet came in, we drew salt, but without room to exercise, it gave us scurvy. In June, a number of us were ordered to the Three Rivers General Hospital, where we remained for about 6 weeks. Afterward, 16 of us were sent on a French vessel, under Hessian guard consisting of a sergeant and 12 men. The guards made the mistake of setting down their weapons and posting no sentry. When they came to anchor in the night, the Hessians rolled themselves up in the mainsail, and then went to sleep. We also laid on the deck. At the time, an Irish passenger came to us and said,
"Boys, now is your time. Rise, arm yourselves, take the boat and go ashore. I have £5 in money, and you can have it if you go. I'll not lift a finger to prevent you from escaping."
But there were 2 in our company who were unable to take care of themselves, and we were afraid that if we escaped, they would be killed in retaliation. We resolved that if we ever had such a chance again, we would take it. Upon returning to shore, however, we were strictly watched by an English guard. We remained in this prison until the 17th of October, in 1781. We were taken out so the prison could be converted into a storehouse. As dusk fell, there were 3 British soldiers bringing in supplies. One of the soldiers, carrying an armful of carrot tobacco, bumped against me, gave me a wink, and turned his head the other way so I could take one. The other prisoners, taking the hint, followed my lead. We were taken up the river 45 miles to Coteau du Lac and put in a barracks on the island. That fall and winter, under Tory guard, we had the liberty of the 40-acre island. In the month of February, a Tory officer named James McAlpin commanded the guard. He was a spiteful, malicious fellow with a personal hatred for some of our number. James was the only son of Daniel McAlpin, the loyalist commander of the American Volunteers. While his father had escaped to Canada, he and the rest of his family were rounded up by the Boston Militia in 1777. After a harsh captivity at the hands of the Patriots, he was released with his mother and sisters. Following his father's footsteps, he fled to Canada to join Burgoyne's army at just 12 years of age. By the time he was 16, James McAlpin was in command of the prison, and was thus in a position to exact his vengeance. One day, McAlpin ordered a prisoner to clean the snow away from his dooryard. The prisoner responded that he was no gentleman's servant, but a prisoner of war, and that McAlpin had no right to order him to work. McAlpin then tied him up and gave him 75 strokes with his rattan. After the beating, McAlpin had the man put in irons in a cold room where snow and ashes piled up knee-deep. Not satisfied with this, he then ordered a corporal and a file of men to bring him 1 prisoner from each room, to the number of 22. McAlpin ordered them all to clear his dooryard, but they too refused. Some of the prisoners he gave 75 lashes with his rattan. Others he had forced into a painful position, with their necks and feet tied together, then shackled them in pairs, and locked them in the cold ash house. There he set a sentinel at the door with orders not to let anyone relieve them, nor hand them any fire, provisions, or water. One in our number was a black man named Charlie. McAlpin ordered Charlie to play the fiddle for him, so that McAlpin could dance while the prisoners suffered. But Charlie nobly refused. McAlpin then beat him with his rattan in a most brutal manner, put a pair of handcuffs on him, and confined him to the freezing ash house as well. The rest of us, seeing our friends in this situation, wrapped a pair of pincers in a file and a blanket. We then went to the sentinel and requested to hand them to our comrades. The sentinel answered that it was against his orders to let them have anything, but fling them in while I'm walking the other way. After getting the pincers smuggled in, those in the ash house were able to break out of their chains, creep out the back window, and escape to their rooms. In the morning at roll call, a furious McAlpin picked them out, put them into the barrack chambers, and ordered that they should have no fire to warm them, nor anything to eat or drink. Destitute of any clothing, confined in irons in a small, cold room, and groaning under the severe pains of their frozen bodies, their sufferings cannot easily be imagined, far less described. Nevertheless, we continued to sneak them hot stones, drink, and tobacco. They were kept in this situation for 2 days, until Lieutenant Lyon, another prisoner, went to the sergeant of the guards and asked what could be done. The sergeant said if Lyon would go with him, he would talk to McAlpin, and if McAlpin refused to release the men from the ash house, the sergeant would take it upon himself to arrest him. It was a bold plan. When they brought the subject to McAlpin, he answered, "How old do you suppose I be?" along with some other impertinent responses. At length, Mr. Lyon told him it was no trifling matter, and that they wanted a direct answer. McAlpin then promised to release the men. But James McAlpin had a malignant and vengeful disposition, and their earlier sufferings were only a prelude to more painful torments. Soon after, McAlpin went to the guardhouse and sent for the prisoners one at a time to be tortured in a most cruel manner. Some he beat with his rattan. Some he laid head and heels. Some were surrounded with soldiers, armed with bayonets pointing directly at them so near as to render the prisoners unable to move without being pierced, while McAlpin whipped and caned them till he gutted his vengeance. Who could describe the inhumane scene? To see a prisoner, the victim of cruelty and wretchedness, guiltless and defenseless, confined in irons with his hands behind him, ready to faint from starvation, groaning under the excruciating pains of his frozen limbs, bathed in blood as it gushed from his mangled body, tears flowing from his eyes in streams, which spoke in a language more forcible than thunder, trickling down his frozen cheeks, the sorrows of a heart swollen with grief and racked with pain. Others in this unhappy number were hung by the neck until nearly dead, while their hands were clasped in irons and their faces black with death. When they were finally taken down, the irons were jammed into their mouths until they were filled with blood. One by the name of Herwood was hung by the neck until he was dead for all appearances. Miraculously, he came to and carried the mark of the rope for more than a month. One man by the name of Albright, whom McAlpin had beaten so cruelly that his back was black and blue, showed his wounds to the prison doctor. After the exam, Dr. Connor reported McAlpin to the British general. Major Gray and 4 captains traveled to Coteau-du-Lac to place McAlpin under arrest. During the court-martial, we testified how food provided to us was crawling with vermin. Blankets and straw were intentionally withheld, and many of us were deprived of the simple necessity of water. Even the soldiers under his command reported to Gray that McAlpin was often intoxicated and treated the prisoners poorly. He was stripped of his commission for his most barbarous and inhumane treatment of prisoners. At the age of 17, his military career was over. James McAlpin and his family sailed for England, never to return to America again.